Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Branden Coluccio, and he is the Managing Director of Relentless Ventures. Looking forward to having a conversation with you today, learning everything I can from you. We enter these pretty raw and uncut, so I don't know a whole lot about who you are and what you're going to do. So we're going to learn that organically, so everybody kind of gets to feel this is a natural conversation. That's always my goal. So let's start off with just saying hello and thank you for being here, and we'll get into your background.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
I always like to start off with the origin story. Kind of the old joke is you were born and you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. How in the hell did you end up on this show? So kind of give us your background and your share with us, give the audience a great reason why they should be hanging out and listen to me and you chat.
Well, I will do my best. So I've got a long version and I've got a short version. Got a bunch of war stories that go along with either one. But very briefly, I come from an entrepreneurial background. All of my family members are small business owners and grew up in that world. Restaurant owners. My dad's a builder, was a builder. He's retired now. My aunt owns high-end clothing stores. Everybody's kind of a business person. And I always wanted to be that, but I wanted to build big businesses. And I struggled deeply with why they would not listen to me and grow their little, Main Street businesses. Nothing wrong with Main Street businesses, but why they didn't want to take them and turn them into, full-fledged enterprises. And they would always yell at me and poke fun at me and say, Branden, you're 13. Like, you don't know anything about this. What are you talking about? Right? Shut up. And so I always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. And I decided that from a very young age, I was going to go and I was going to build big businesses. And the way I thought you did that, and maybe I'm right, I think I'm like 50% right, is that you go the Wall Street way and you work in private equity and you go and buy and build big companies, right? And so I had great aspirations of doing that, went off to school, studied business economics, went and ended up landing a gig doing some, M&A focused, transaction focused, like management consulting work in biotech and pharma. So started there and then did a brief stint in corporate development for a $1 billion publicly traded mining and metals business, and then ultimately jumped ship and landed in private equity for a small group. Shouldn't say small. I mean, they've done probably by now billions in transactions, both in real estate and operating businesses. Been around for a long time, kind of a small shop nobody's heard of, but it was a great experience. Worked there for a few years, kind of got a lot of tremendous exposure and learned, the fundamentals of deal making, and got some interesting deals under my belt, and decided one day that I was on the wrong side of the check. I was basically tasked with sourcing all new deals, running diligence, doing the modeling, all of the kind of associate level stuff. And we were working on this one deal out in California. I won't say the name of the company, but essentially what they did was they broke down and set up operating rooms for hospitals. Okay. So that a lot of people don't know that that's an outsourced service. And in many cases it is. And so it's a good little business run by a 32-year-old guy, not that old. I think it was like 4 years old. And they were doing about 2 million TTM EBITDA. I think pro forma was like 4 or 5, 4.5, something like that. And we go to our bench and we find this, kind of healthcare executive. We diligence the deal and then decide we're going to put an offer in. So we make an offer. It's a competitive process. It's an investment bank's process. And so we decide we're going to come in at 7 times pro forma EBITDA. And I am like, we are totally overpaying for this thing. right? So I think we were 38 million, something like that. So we submit our offer. I'm on the edge of my seat for weeks, right? I really, really want to do this deal. I think we've made a very competitive bid. I'm concerned, like I said, that we overpaid. And I called the investment banker a couple weeks later and asked about this opportunity. I'm like, surely we won, right? Like, or at least we're in the final running. And they're like, oh no, that deal went to a very large private equity firm based out of Chicago for 11 times pro forma earnings. Pro forma earnings, not TTM earnings, pro forma earnings. And at that very moment, I was like, what the hell am I doing? I am an associate. I'm chained to a desk working 80 hours a week, married to an Excel model. Why don't I go do deals myself? And serendipitously, I had an opportunity to do that. A couple of folks also out of the healthcare services space who had come to our firm kind of looking for capital. Two former executives were trying to do their own thing. And for whatever reason, the deal didn't work out with our firm. They recruited me and they said, hey, listen, if you can help us raise some capital to get this thing going, we'd be willing to give you a piece of the business. So, I was 26. I was very excited to be invited to the party and believed that I could help them kind of get it done. And it was also in the substance abuse treatment industry, which was very personal to me. I lost my sister last year, actually, to this illness. And this was many years ago now, but she was even struggling then. She struggled for 15 years. Anyway, so we go off, we raise a bunch of money, we build this business and sell it off to private equity. A few years later, I left private equity to go run it and stepped in, I guess, as almost like a GP / CFO. And, we grew that business very quickly. I think we sold, right around when we sold, we had about 150 employees, 4 clinical locations, a corporate office, the whole shebang. And we sold that business to private equity for, about 66 million. We did quite well, and then went off and I co-founded a real estate development company called Captiva Capital Partners, where we developed both ground up and value add self-storage, Class A self-storage projects in and around Philadelphia and Florida. We developed, I believe it's still Philadelphia's largest Class A climate controlled self-storage facility. Sold that to CubeSmart for $24 million, something like that. And then my life kind of had a negative twist of fate, and I was off doing other deals as well. There's a couple of small other deals in there, but what ended up happening is healthcare is a tough space. And for those who don't know this full story, I talk a little bit about this on my Instagram, but what ended up happening is the government launched an investigation into that business, the operations of the business, not the transaction. And what I found out happened was the 2 gentlemen who had recruited me had this elaborate illegal kickback scheme going on with urine analyses and a laboratory. Well, that is highly illegal. In some industries, kickbacks happen all the time. They're normal, they're a part of it, and they're accepted, and they're fine. In healthcare, it is criminal, right? Like not a fine, like criminal. And so it was one of those situations where I ended up getting roped into it. Initially thought nothing was going to happen. My lawyer basically said, hey, listen, easiest case to defend because you never received a penny. I didn't even know they were doing this. And come to find out, they come in, they start, looking into a bunch of things. And, during our growth, we had set up what we believed to be was a compliant, basically it was like a lending program for people who couldn't afford care. So like you think of like Care Credit and some of these other companies out there, we set up something similar to try to help people get into treatments who didn't have resources. And so anyway, they dig in and they're like, well, there's, conflict of interest there. And we believe that is, some form of patient inducement. And so it's like, oh my God. Right. So now all of a sudden, this thing is starting to become a real case here. And, I'm at my real estate development company. Things are going really well. We've done, I think we did probably about 40 million in deals, total developed value, something like that. Just in, a year, 18 months or so. And, I get the worst phone call of my life, and, come to find out they decide they want to make an example out of the case. Anybody who made any money or did well, they're throwing the book at them. And so my lawyer says, there's 11 or 12, I don't remember exactly, people who are going to be indicted, and your name is on the list. And so in that moment, I was probably 30 at that time, maybe 31. and I'd sold the company at 29 and, was now having fun. And in that moment, like, it's just total devastation, right? My entire identity as somebody, I'd never been in any trouble in my life or anything, always viewed myself as a, transparent, honest individual. It just all sort of crumbled. All right. And, fought it. Last one to kind of take a deal, and everybody else, kind of gave in and was a little bit stubborn in that regard. And, I had some good advisors, and they're like, Branden, you're super young. Like, don't do this to yourself, right? Just take a deal, take the hit, move on. You know how to do deals. You're going to go do great things, right? You'll live to fight another day. But if you go to fight this thing and you lose, they're going to whack you, brother. So that's what we did. Took a deal, sat down with my family, and just decided that, this was the best option. And big, several $1 million in fines, and, ended up having to do about 10 and a half, 11 months in a low security facility. So,
Oh, wow.
This is a cautionary tale for all of the people who want to get into deal making. Do not get into a deal or an industry that you don't understand. I did not fully understand how predatory the regulators are in healthcare, right? And it is not, hey, don't do this again. It's clink, clink, we're going to lock you up. That's the consequence. You fill out a piece of paperwork wrong, they lock you up, right? Like, there is no tolerance in healthcare. So had I known how strict it is, had I known the requirements, I probably would have stayed away from the industry, or at least wouldn't have been involved as deeply as I was. That being said, I think it's a great place to deliver value to an end user if you have a great business that does high quality work. But anyway, so, this was several years ago now, but, once I kind of got through that, I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go buy and build companies again. And if I ever get wiped out again, I will do the exact same thing. It is by far the most interesting and greatest way to build wealth, bar none. And with Relentless Ventures, my firm, getting back to your original question, how and why am I on this podcast? We do both acquisition and advisory work. So we have a portfolio, and I'm happy to go into the portfolio of 5 different businesses, and we typically take minority stakes. We generally are quite active in those. And the idea is to, build what I call institutional quality assets and exit them within a 3 to 5 year period, working very, very hard alongside the management teams that sit within those businesses. And I say institutional quality assets, and that's really just kind of bringing all of my grooming and, investment banking and private equity and understanding exactly what those folks are looking for. And we apply that logic to our portfolio companies. And then kind of on the other side, we do generally like some kind of exit preparation and value max work before companies are going to go into exit. And we will approach it similar to almost like an exit advisor, but we do it for equity instead of a transaction fee. And so, so that's what we do. We've got a bunch of deals. We've got a number of advisory deals that we're working on, and more just continue to pile up. And it's a ton of fun. Absolutely love it. And we get to create a ton of value and work with some amazing people. So,
You and I have a lot of similarities throughout life. I grew up around entrepreneurs. My dad always had something going on the side. He worked a full-time job for 44 years, but he always had, when I was young, he would restore Mustangs in the garage, and he owned woodworking. Then he had a metal shop where we have a bunch of aunts and uncles that own heat and air businesses, and he would make the control boxes or whatever he'd bend the metal that all the conducting tubes, or what you would call it, the air tubes would plug into the big steel boxes, everything from the fireplace chutes and all that stuff too. He'd bend the metal and make those things. I was a real estate investor, had a real estate investment firm, buy-in foreclosures and all that stuff. And Oklahoma made medical marijuana okay. And all my real estate buddies are trying to get into that space. And the problem with that space was most of the people that were going into it had been doing it a long time, right? And it just became legal. So that was the caution there. And be honest, they were popping up so fast. There were more medical dispensaries than there were like gas stations and stuff. I live way out in the country, even in Oklahoma. Between the closest grocery store and my house was 16 miles. So it took me 16 miles to go to a grocery store, but I passed 7 dispensaries along the way. It was that bad, right? Well, they came to me. Some of the guys came to me and said, "Hey, join this venture with us. We should do this a while. We got these guys that they really know the space inside and out." I had a property out in the country that was really remote that would have been perfect for their greenhouses and that type of stuff. They wanted to, that was my contribution. Just let them use that property. That's where they were going to do their grow. And turned to find out I said no. And about a year and a half later, they got busted. And two of my real estate friends had no idea what was going on. They just got arrested with everybody else. But they were when they grew too much, they would take it out of state, which is illegal across state lines. And then when they had sold too much and they couldn't grow it, they would go sneak it into state and give it to the dispensary, call it their own.
Yeah.
Right. Could have very likely. And I don't know what the status of that is. I think they're still working on that. But, it's taken a long time. They're fighting it. It was only a couple years ago. It's scary. You really do need to know, the industry inside and out, what's possible, what's not possible. Right. Like I have people all the time saying, "Hey, you ran that real estate investment firm for years. Why don't you come help me start one up doing the same thing you did?" I was like, "No, it's too regulated now." When we did it, you could do investor-backed short sales, and that's what we specialized in. Now it's a good way to end up in court with either civil or criminal court with the banks because they made most of the stuff that we were able to do mortgage fraud, right?
Right.
We did it in full disclosure, but like we made them sign notice. Like we sent notice after notice that this is an investor buying this property, and there were certain banks at the early on in the process. We stopped in 2017, but there are certain banks that like we just don't deal with investors anymore, right?
Yeah.
Bank of America, some of the other guys were just like we couldn't help those, anybody that had a house in that with that bank, we couldn't help them anymore because the banks wouldn't deal with us.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can't control. I can't control the actions of other people, right? I mean, and I'm not in any. I don't have any interest in kind of relitigating the case. I've accepted responsibility for my level of involvement, but in this, the government had actually admitted this. Like, there was very obvious evidence that most of what these guys were doing was intentionally hidden, right? Like, we had statements from employees that literally said, "Do not copy Branden on emails ever." Like, what?
Mm,
How? You can't control everything, right? The company had 100
right.
employees, right? Like, I'm a CFO. Nobody understands most of the time what a CFO does anyway.
Oh,
So
wow, that makes it even harder because there's so many rules around being like somebody asked me when I went back to college, to do my master's degree, they asked me if I was doing accounting. I was like, I seen the regulations come. This was right before I think I graduated from my MBA. I did it late in life. I graduated in 2007, but Sarbanes-Oxley was already looking to be a thing. There was like all these. This is 2008 happened right after I graduated, but it was already starting to kind of semi collapse. I'm like, they're going to regulate this. This is no way that being a CPA is going to be something I want to be in 10 years. So
I'm
I
not a
went the
CPA,
marketing route.
right? That's the other part. I haven't taken accounting class since I don't know when, seventh grade.
But
Um,
I always said be accountant, go to jail, right? Because they made this, if you're the CFO and or like you have to discharge your duty of that responsibility as much as the CEO, if not more. So if the company did something wrong,
that was the argument that they made. The prosecution was, I think, very experienced and basically said, listen, like, we're going to argue to the judge if we go to trial that we're going to toss out, the excuse of what we'll throw in, like basically what's called willful blindness, right? So like we'll argue to the jury that like, if you didn't know, you had an obligation to, and so you can't use that argument. Right. And so, that's your
right?
only argument. And so it's one of those things where you're up against the might of, the US government, and it's not a fight you want to take on. So I think, listen, I think all in all, and this is going to sound a little crazy, it was the best experience I've actually ever been through. It
A
was
hell of a lesson.
it was, yes, it is a deep, deep lesson, but it forced me to do this very deep reevaluation of myself. And I'd always considered myself to be an honorable, honest, trustworthy, hardworking person who would, do right by people. And, whether big or small, at some point I made a decision along the way that maybe violated my own values, right? What I like to say to people is, the man in my head didn't match the man in the mirror, right? And I needed to do some soul searching to kind of reconcile where did I misstep. And so, when I resigned from our real estate company, I pulled out of all of our other deals. was very quickly and rapidly building. And suddenly when all this happened, I just stopped. So it was just me sitting on my couch for, months, feeling sorry for myself, drinking myself to death, not taking care of myself, just really in a bad position. And I just woke up one day and I was like, I can't live the rest of my life like this, right? I'm not going to let this control me. And I was newly married. I had an obligation to my wife to kind of make the best of it. And so I immediately, I quit drinking. I started getting fit and like really just focusing on the things I could control at that point. There was a lot sort of before we knew what the outcome was. You're sort of sitting in limbo basically. And I was just, trying my best to control what I could. And that was my own actions and the way I treated people and the way I interacted with others, and, started trying to give back as well. And really began to see the benefit of that in my mental health. And I think a lot of that laid the foundation for the work that I ended up doing, throughout my journey, and then what I do now. And, after I went away, I held these, workshops. So I was away during COVID, by the way. And so it was like full lockdown, right? So nothing.
The whole world was locked down too.
Yeah. Well, lockdown in prison is way different, right, than being stuck in your house. Months on end, you're not going outside, you're not seeing the sun. Anytime you move a unit within the facility, so they're all separated into units, you would have to go into solitary confinement to quarantine, which is where they would put people for disciplinary reasons. So I did 3 stints in solitary confinement, not for disciplinary reasons, just bad luck. So it definitely changed me. And one of the things I did when I ultimately ended up in the community was I started holding these workshops on how to build businesses, how to acquire businesses, how to, kind of transform your life through this, beautiful thing called entrepreneurship. And what ended up happening was I earned a lot of respect. I'm not a tough guy by any means, but I earned a lot of respect from people because I was trying to bring something positive into what is a very dark place. And so it was a really interesting place, an interesting time, and met some really wonderful people actually who were, maybe not so wonderful when out in public, but when you sit down and you talk to them and you figure out, okay, why are you here? A lot of it is drug trafficking. A lot of it are people who have, come from very difficult circumstances, and you find out all they're trying to do is take care of their family. And so my reasoning to them was, your current pursuit is very short-sighted. You're going to get caught. It's going to come back to you and you're going to end up right back here. And the response is always, well, I've never had a real job. I don't know how to make money. And I was like, well, that's what I'm here to teach you. Right. And so I would teach all different types of classes on different themes. We talked about investing. We talked about, Warren Buffett's principles and, buying and selling real estate and just anything that I knew how to do that I believed could add value. And the idea was that hopefully one of those people, one of my, friends inside would take something positive away from it and go apply it in their real life and hopefully avoid, coming back in. And it was actually a lot of fun and very interesting.
Yeah. So let's go into the positive realm, man. You turn this thing around. You're back into the game. You've got holdings already. What have you built since, man? Tell us about your world now?
Well, we've got some interesting deals. So let's see. I'll start with probably our best case study is a business we came into about 2 years ago, end of 2022. It's a training and education company for accountants and bookkeepers. And it was basically a situation where the founder, first-time entrepreneur, had some success, started to see some rapid growth in the company, and met her at a mastermind and basically started talking about her business and sharing some of the issues she was facing. And she was sort of on the cusp of rapid growth, but really was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I love it when entrepreneurs, I almost never hear men say this, by the way, but I love when they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. And they probably have a successful business, but that shows a certain level of humility. And those are the kind of people I want to work with. And so we ended up having a good conversation. And, part of, where I've had success is, building big enterprises, valuable businesses relatively quickly. And I thought that we could apply a very similar playbook to this business. And so, that business was quite small, way smaller than when the deals we're doing now. But I think it was doing like 30K a month or something like that on average. And today that business does 300 a month in 2 years. So, we're dead set on, scaling that business to probably 5 million of EBITDA and then, eventually transacting. We're in process right now on, maybe doing our first add-on acquisition. We've crossed the million of EBITDA mark, and, we're now at a point where we've got some dry powder to start to really get to work. And what I say to a lot of people is like, and some might disagree with me here, but I don't really start doing much until we get to 1 million of EBITDA, because it's like, I think it's very easy to get distracted in the early stages. And, your business, even at 1 million of EBITDA or even 5 million is small, right? If you see the game that private equity is playing, like you're puny, you're like nearly non-existent. Most private equity firms won't even look at you if you're less than 5 million. Is it under 5 million? No, it's 4.5. I don't care. Call me when it's 5, right? That's generally the response. And that's still the lower middle market. That's the lower middle market. We haven't even gotten to mid-market, right? So I think a lot of people end up getting distracted. So we tend to withhold on you pulling the trigger on acquisitions unless there's some kind of an exception that, it's a deal we can't turn up or it's great synergy or whatever. But so we're kind of in the process on that, and that thing is just growing gangbusters. So that's a great one. We've started, we've added recurring revenue, we've added a technology component to it, and so we're not only building cash flow, I think we're building enterprise value. So the idea would be to, instead of just being we'll call it a training business, we're now an education technology company, right? And that business, the profile of that business, assuming it's profitable and growing with recurring revenue, et cetera, has a very different profile than, say, an education company that's selling a one-off product one time. And so we can capture significant multiple expansion that way. So that's the game plan. The idea is to try to sell that one in 2027. So we're about 3 years out now, and we're actually beginning the process of doing all the preparatory work now, bringing in the right team members, kind of transitioning the owner out, over time, so that we can demonstrate a consistent track record of profitable growth without high dependence on the manager or the founder rather. And that is a nuance that I can't stress enough. I see deals all the time. I get deals coming out my ears, and I can't tell you how many times a week I hear people who run good, profitable businesses that are so dependent on the owner, no one will buy it. And we're talking businesses that'll do 2 million in profit. No one touches them, because the moment you pull that founder out or you write them a check and they go fishing or they disappear, you're toast. So what do? They have multiple deals they try to go into. The deals break up, fall apart, can't get financed for some reason, and they decide they're just going to shut the company down. Yeah, how many times a week I hear that, and it breaks my heart. But they're the same people.
That's where the majority of them will end up if they don't realize that it's not an overnight thing. It's not when you're ready to retire. Okay, I'm going to sell this in 6 months and be gone. It's a 2 to 3 year trend process, and you need to replace yourself. There are so few true great operators looking to acquire a company. Your chances of landing one, you might as well go down and buy a damn lotto ticket, right? Because you got the same retirement possibility from the lotto ticket from finding the perfect operator who wants to do all the crap you're doing every single day. Your 60-hour weeks running the thing you've run for 30 years, right? Who wants to buy a job? And you're going to get a 1 or 2x multiple on a job, right? That's just what the SBA is okay with. 1, 2, 3x. If you're lucky and everything's perfect, you might be able to pull a 3 or 4, but I've never heard anything get funded above that.
Yeah, it's a rare situation, and I think it also exposes a certain level of risk in the business that most people don't want to acknowledge. And unfortunately, those are the same people who don't have the humility to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Because the truth is they've had success, right? They built a profitable business. The problem is they don't know how to transition that business from a profitable, great owner-managed company into an institutional quality asset. Like I said, 20 minutes ago, right? There's a huge gap between those two things. And a lot of founders need to have the humility to say, I don't know how to get it to that point. And if they did, they would end up with a far more valuable exit at the end of the day.
They
That
may not even have to sell, right? If you go through all the process to make something a
yeah,
great asset for a PE firm, you're not there 40 hours a week, right? You could be considering yourself like the chairman of the board. You're going to weekly or maybe even just a biweekly, once every other week meeting with the team that's running it, getting key performance indicators and giving vision and fixing the
continuity.
occasional problem with the client you've had for 30 years and the relationship that just is more solid with you, occasionally taking the guy out for dinner or golf, and doing that less and less. But I just I have the same thing. It breaks my heart that there's so many great companies out there that are truly only great because the operator's great. It's a different skill set. It's totally different skill set, and to have the humility, like you said, to say, "You know what? I don't know how to clone myself. I don't know how to bring a team in here that can do what I do. Who out there can?" There's a great book that I keep pitching on this show and everything else. It's called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan,
Mhm.
and I almost wanna buy a stack of them. And every time I hear this story of, some owner that
Yeah.
doesn't wanna transition, it's like, "Read this, man. It'll save your freaking life."
Mhm.
Like, you don't have to figure out how to do something. You have to figure out who does it better than you
Yeah.
and call them up. A lot of times, it's a lot more affordable than you think.
Yeah, that's a fact. I think when you talk to people, this is such a good topic. But I'm thinking about a guy who owns a pool company right now. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he was going to shut the company down, and does a lot of SDE, right? Like very very profitable, good business. He's got enough money to retire, so he can just shut it down and move on. Anyway, I was asking about his troubles to bring in, a manager or somebody to kind of GM the company. And, he's like, yeah, we've tried it, multiple times. It just doesn't work out. I can't get the right people. And I said, okay, well, interesting. We hear that a lot. When was the last time you tried it? 5 years ago. Okay. Well, clearly you're not trying enough. And so I will always get some variation of that response. Like, oh,
Mhm.
we tried, it didn't work, or, we brought in somebody and they stole from the company, like whatever the excuse is. And so usually the answer is you're not trying hard enough and you're not recruiting the right people, and or you're not willing to pay enough for the right people, and you're probably not structuring their compensation package correctly.
There's a play there, a serious one. I've only been out of 250 interviews, I've interviewed one guy doing it well.
Yeah.
And, he does driving schools, and the reason he buys micro driving schools, he doesn't care how small they are, if they're in the right cities and stuff, in the right locations, because it's so regulatory, it's hard to get all the permits and everything
Mm.
else, it's just easier for him to buy it, and he's been doing it for so long, he has an amazing systems, processes, and training and software solution to bring everybody up to date on. There's a play inside of those pool cleaning service and pool management services because I see them all the time.
Yeah.
Companies doing hundreds of thousands of dollars up for sale for 1x, basically 1 year's worth of, revenue or salary. It's 2 guys and a truck. If you built a system and process and really could do it well, you could buy these things up and, like, really make a killing on it because, like I said, constantly seeing them in almost every state for 1x, 2x. Now, there's been brokers arguing, "No, I get 5x for mine." Bullshit. That's what that's what you run them. That's what you advertise them for. But I can go on Craigslist right now and on Facebook Marketplace and on Biz Buy Sell and show you a half a dozen pool cleaning services that are for sale for 1 year's worth of their revenue.
And in some cases, that might be too much.
It is absolutely because it's 100% owner operators. Unless you're that guy like the guy I interviewed that had the California driving schools, unless you have a plug and play, within 3 weeks you train everybody, you know how to put feet on the ground, and you've got systems, processes, and everything you need, and it's just a mechanized system, you'd be making a mistake buying something that small, so centered on the owner.
My advice to most of those people is, listen, you're going to have to sell to a competitor, right? Because they're the only people who have we'll call it the knowledge base to be
Mhm.
able to take what you have and actually extract value of it. But there's a downside to that too, right? It's like, okay, well, if you're coming to me and you want me to buy your company, why don't I just wait for you to shut down and I'm going to go eat your business, right? Like, why would I pay you for that? Right. So it's, can it get done? Have I seen it get done? Sure. But you're not going to extract maximum value. That's a fact.
What else? So what are the other holdings? You told us the story of
Yeah.
of of your
We,
educational one. Tell me about some
yeah,
of
we've got that one. That one's going well. We've got, let's see what else we got. We have a lubricants business, not the kind you're thinking of. This is for, say, small engines, guns, exercise equipment, etc. We just did this deal this year. Good little business. We have an existing manager in place who decided to stick around. It was run by an older gentleman who just got tired and wanted to see the business into, be able to kind of flourish into its potential. And so, that's going well. I think we've been in that one since May, and it's, already trending the right direction. So we'll see. Still early.
What was the product again? I missed that part.
It's it's an industrial lubricant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for applications,
It's like all kinds of graphite. Is it multiple, or is this a particular chemical composition they came up with?
It's a solvent-based product that is all natural, and the idea is it's highly effective and non-toxic, right? That's kind of
Awesome.
the ISP.
I try to get into that space. I had a guy who was a brilliant scientist. His son wasn't, or son-in-law was. He was a brilliant sales guy, and they created two different products that were organic enzymes that did things in the chemical space that you would never imagine. One of them was organic enzyme that turned dirt into concrete. Basically, you could mix it with water, pour it over a patio that you squared off of dirt, and then pat it down. And when it hardened, it would last 20 to 30 years like concrete. Turn it into dirtcrete. And they were selling it to like dirt roads and that stuff. And they made another organic enzyme that would eat paraffin. He would eat anything oil based. It would basically, the output was methane gas. So I came in was helping him do some sales and introduce him to other verticals, like the enzyme that could eat plastics and turn it into methane gas and dissolve plastics, and anything petroleum based. I was pitching to some waste management companies that did methane recovery anyway, so they could take this organic enzyme, spray it on their landfill. They're doing methane recovery, and as it eats and dissolves the plastics in the soil, the oil-based products in the soil, releases more methane. They recover more methane. They sold that to some Chinese company. I think they buried it, right? So I don't know why they did, but I haven't seen it since. But that was something that was like, it was a father-son business doing 7 figures in revenue, probably high six figures in EBITDA, because it was basically a chemist and a sales guy. And they got offered insane money. I tried to get a work deal with them, and they said they're talking to somebody else. And I gave them a range, would I be interested in it? And they just laughed. They were getting offers 10x.
Well, the idea is, the companies just struggled with, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the people who are running it, but like there were a lot of things that were missed. Just some kind of general mistakes that were made, opportunities that were not being maximized. The interesting thing about this deal is it's not just the brand. We actually bought the manufacturing facility and all of the equipment as well. So what we will likely end up doing, and we can manufacture any solvent-based product. And so what we will likely do is carve off the manufacturing and start doing contract manufacturing, and then let the brand that we acquired, let that kind of run and scale. And the idea is we've got a manufacturing business now for free. So we're working on that as we speak. Also would love to try to contract with the federal government. We've had some interesting inquiries from international military organizations who are now testing our products on their military equipment because they're moving away from highly toxic products. And so I think it's kind of an interesting and unique space to be right now, and so we'll see how it goes, but it's been an interesting deal. If you had ever told me I'm going to do a lubricants business, I would have laughed in your face. But like I said, we can't predict this stuff.
Business is a business, right?
Yeah.
So what's your buy box now? What is it you're looking like? What would pique your interest? How big does it need to be? What does the future need to look like? What are what stage in evolution do they need to be as far as systems and processes and stuff?
Sure. So I don't mind hair on a deal, but the core of the business has to be good. We are now not doing anything super small because we just only have so much time to do deals. It's me, and I have an associate, and then kind of a contract team of people that I'll bring in as needed. But so we're very busy. But it's generally, a minimum of, $1 million of revenue. with good margins. I won't touch anything that's less than 25% profit margin. My decision for that is why. Why would you do that? There's plenty of businesses that are, highly profitable. I also think that, we all struggle with a little bit of, hubris in that, like, oh, I'm a business whiz. I can run any company. And you don't realize that when you're running a small business with very thin margins, you have no room for error. Right. So
Right.
I like to factor in what I call my stupidity factor. And that is that
I'm a big fan.
I
You and I see eye to
assume
eye
that
on that.
I'm a total moron and that I'm going to jack this whole thing up, and I need some cushion to be able to compensate for that. So ideally, we're not going to screw it up. We're not going to try to screw it up, right? But you've got to factor in that margin for error. So love to see margins in the 25 plus, 30% plus. Like that training business is 40% plus margin business. Wonderful business.
Yeah.
And this lubricants business is about 25, 30% as well. So it's a good little deal. And then really, so those are kind of the financial metrics, and we'll go, way higher than that. I've, worked on companies that are, 25 million of EBITDA and up. So like, in this small business world, like we're generally nowhere near that, of course, but really for me, it's attitude and situation. So, the founder has enough humility to say, I am open to outside help. I want to see this business flourish, and I am not interested in trying to, mass market this thing to anyone and everyone. We don't get involved in competitive processes. I always just wish people luck. And frankly, we actually help a lot of people in competitive processes, but we will not spend our time and energy and, resources on a deal that we're going to try to win that's in a competitive process. That's not what we do. So generally, we're looking for people who have the humility to say, I want help and I want to grow. And the core profile of the business reflects, something that's worth our time and energy, and that we believe there's, significant upside that we can unlock by, doing certain things, implementing best practices, bringing in the right team, improving sales and marketing, generally operating the business in a more professional way. All of these things really do make a difference. And essentially we come in and we try to run the private equity playbook and be a conduit for private equity. So we're taking these, businesses that are generally too small, would not meet the criteria of, a private equity firm who is going to get involved in a competitive process and is willing to pay top dollar because they have a gun to their head to deploy capital. We are trying to create an asset that they would love to acquire. Right. And so
That's awesome.
If they see that vision and that aligns with them, that is where the personality dynamic has to match. Otherwise, I found that it just generally doesn't work.
Yeah, I do a little bit. I spend most of my time doing a consulting for equity type of play. I do make them pay me a monthly retainer just because
Yep.
I don't want to end up in a situation where I try to get somebody to do something for a couple of years and then there's no exit for me because they don't want to sell at the other end.
Absolutely.
That said,
Yeah.
I take equity and stuff, and the biggest thing I have to have with an individual is their humbleness to go, okay, who do I need to bring in for X, right? And or one of my pet peeves is somebody says, well, that's the way we've done it for 30 years. I was like, that's not what your acquisition target wants, right?
Here's the thing that I find funny about that one. I love that one. And it's like, for me, it's like they just stepped into a trap, because it's like, well, you've been working on this for 30 years and your business only does $600,000 a year in revenue. What the fuck have you been doing for 30 years? And then they're like, oh,
yeah. Got in my comfort zone. Exactly.
No, I'm not an asshole. I'm just pointing out the reality of your situation. Maybe you should consider you haven't done the right things for 30 years. There are your competitors who started 30 years ago who are doing $200 million a year. Why aren't you?
Yeah, and if you look at the any other industry, if you look at the VC industry, it takes a different human being to take a company from bootstrap or idea to bootstrapped, from bootstrap to $1 million in a revenue, or even the first dollar revenue, and then from the first dollar revenue to 5 or 10. If you look at a lot of these things, that's the reason the VCs change out the CEOs is you have to be one of two people. You have to be extremely able to adapt and grow, and that's far and few between. You've got your Mark Zuckerbergs and stuff like that who have been able to do it, but in most cases, there, you hear story after story after story. It's like, hey, I worked with these VCs. We raised money, and after 2 years, they replaced me as CEO of my own company, and I got mad and left. I was like, "That's because you weren't the right guy at the right stage,"
Yeah,
right?
it's part of it.
Yeah, it's just part of the process, and it's extremely rare for a human being to have all of the skill set and all the humbleness to see. Even looked at Oracle, Larry Page and his business partner, they stepped aside for a while because they just knew they weren't the right CEO pair to take it to the next level. And then they went and got mentored, and now, I'm not sure who's running it now, but I think they're back in there. That said, that's a different level of emotional maturity to go, hey, I've got it to where I've got it, but I need to take it bigger, and who's the right person to help me get it there?
Yeah.
It's very often it's not you unless you're really willing to have a true transformational moment about who you are as a human being at your core,
Hmm.
right? And it's the same way of somebody having an ego death, right? When they do some ayahuasca voyage or whatever it is they did, to do their ego death. Business owners need to have, I wouldn't say they need to go into ayahuasca death. That's a personal choice of people. But they do need to pick a time in their life where they go, am I the right person for this? And they have to have some type of transformational moment to where they realize that they're not.
Well,
And they need to seek that skill set out.
yeah, and I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for operators because I've been one, and we're
Mhm.
so involved. Like I basically am like chief revenue officer in these companies, right? So like I know what it feels like to run a business. I know how hard it is. I do it all the time. But I also am constantly trying to make myself completely obsolete within the business, right? So there's a period of time where we have to do a lot of work, and then over time we sort of try to back away, right?
Mhm.
And I think that what I've seen, this is just my observation and opinion, but what I've seen is that entrepreneurs get addicted to feeling important.
Yep.
And they cling to these things that they really probably shouldn't do, don't need to be doing necessarily, that are way below their pay grade, but they do it because they want to feel powerful and they want to feel a sense of importance. And so that's where this introspection, and that's like, this is the beauty of entrepreneurship, right? It's a journey of personal growth. This is where that introspection comes in and is so important. And I think when you have somebody who is open-minded and humble enough to engage in this thought process and to really go through the exercise of, okay, where am I most useful in an organization that is going to help me get from point A, which where I am today, and point B, where I want to be, and that's a $10 million exit or whatever the number is that you want. You have to acknowledge that you probably can't continue to do the same things you've been doing for 30 years if you're going to get to that point. And that's why this personality dynamic, the financial metrics of a buy box are important, but the personality dynamic is far more important, in my opinion. Otherwise, you're gonna be fighting this person the whole way, or you're just gonna have to buy them out and let them kind of go do their thing.
Brandon, we're almost running out of time here, but I want to
Yep.
approach one more topic because it's something I need to solve, and I think you might have the answer. So we got about 15 minutes left scheduled. Is that okay if we hit one more topic real quick?
I've got a call at 3:30 my time, so I think
Well,
we'll be
all right.
yeah,
We'll make this work. So here's the thing. So many of these business owners tie their sense of significance and their ownership
sure.
and their personal identity
Yep.
about being the CEO and owner of this. How do you work with those individuals and help them identify other ways to derive their identity of who they are as a human being? Because that's the shift that needs to happen for them to successfully transfer that ownership and that responsibility over and sell it to some PE firm later. At some point, they've got to decouple. I'm Ronald Skelton, father of two, husband to a wonderful wife. To transition to that from I'm Ronald Skelton, CEO and 40 employees, and you know, if you ask the average Joe on the street, "Hey, who are you?" They'll tell you what they do. They tie almost everybody ties their identity to their profession. My question to you is, as you're doing these deals with these guys and stuff, what is your process, or do you have one to start helping them create an identity outside of work so that they can successfully transition afterwards?
Well, this is such a deep philosophical question. I love it. I could talk to you for an hour about this. I think I've been blessed because I've had my identity destroyed. And I know what that feels like. I've also built and sold a company, and I know what that feels like. And I've never been, there was this interesting period of time in my life where I was fabulously wealthy, incredibly young, like retired at 29, like that's a weird position and extremely miserable and sad. So like, this is what often happens when people sell companies, if they haven't done it before, is you realize, wait a minute, I just exchanged my feeling of self-worth, my power, my platform for leadership, my platform for empowerment. I just exchanged that for some numbers on my phone when I log into my bank account. And I'll never forget the moment when the deal happened and, you open your bank account and there's like, an enormous sum of money there. And you're like, I feel exactly the same. Right. And I think that's an experience that, like, I don't know if I can talk you out of that. Like, I think you just have to feel it to go through it. And I kind of encourage everybody to have that because it's an exit and it is actually very cool. But a lot of people, I think now more and more people are talking about this effect, but like, there are a lot of like exited founders who have like 10 million in the bank and are just miserable. So you have to find this sense of detachment. And I think you find that sense of detachment after you go through this period of struggle. I think this struggle is an opportunity for growth. And what I do is I will tell them all about my experiences and hopefully kind of share some of, that experiential learning, if you will, and they hopefully buy into it and then at least have an idea of what's coming. Right. So at least they're aware of it. I didn't know that was going to happen. Nobody told me that I was going to be super sad and crazy rich. Like, I didn't think that does the non-compute thing in most people's brains. Right.
Right.
And so I try to tee that up. And before we get into a situation, so right now I told you we're 3 years out from this one deal. We've been encouraging the CEO to take more personal time and to do things that she enjoys. So she has to take Thursdays off. Like, she's not allowed to work. Right. And it's go ride your bike, go be with your family, go swimming. Like, I don't care what you do. Right. But you're not allowed to work. And so we're slowly kind of transitioning her into something else. It's important that we're doing that now rather than after the transaction has occurred, because if we can get her something to do that she finds meaningful and valuable and enjoys, that is not tied directly to working in the business, hopefully we can reduce the pain and the brain damage that everybody goes through when they do have an exit. We've sold other businesses, and I think over time have had enough detachment to be able to not really feel anything. It becomes kind of like another deal. Maybe sounds a little cold, but I think when you've done this enough, you sort of just become a little jaded by nature. And so that is really, like, I don't know if that's a process, but the idea is to begin at least 3 years, like, genuinely, I mean this, I know it sounds crazy, but 3 years before you plan to have an exit, to start to try to detach yourself from the business. And, that's tough for a lot of people.
I think one of the fastest way, and I've been working with one guy on this right now. I don't know when he's going to sell because I'm interested when he does. But I was like, he's asking what the process is. And I was like, you've got a general manager in, but you're still pulling 60-hour weeks. What else do you do? And he's a old Rotarian person I know from Rotary. I was like, go do more volunteering. You like to volunteer. That'll give you the same sense of empowerment and helping others, and even some leadership gut feeling. And you fill more time up that, take on another role. Take a role over there in one of these charity organizations you help that requires you to be out of the office one day a week. You don't have to go fishing. I tried that. I tried going fishing every day for a while after I sold my real estate business and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And you get bored, even if it's your favorite thing to do, you get bored pretty damn quick doing it every single day.
Yeah. I walked the beach every day for 6 months, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And so, yeah, it like, everybody thinks it's pina coladas on the beach forever. And you're like, you'd be surprised how quickly that wears off. And, the sports cars are fun and like all that stuff. But it's like, at the end of the day, like, you forget that you own those things half the time. So you've got to find something that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be very simple. And I think that's the beauty of this process, at least that I feel like I've gone through. And I'm certainly addicted to building companies, but like, you start to, I think, appreciate the smaller things in life. For me, it's I have a 14-month-old daughter as my first child. I mean, and I talk to a lot of exited entrepreneurs, and I've seen guys in tears, guys who've built, huge 9-figure companies. And what they'll say is, I would give every dollar back if I could go back and have those 4 years with my kid, because I
Yeah.
was never available. I was never around. I didn't show up. They hate themselves for it. And so, I didn't have children, but I definitely have fallen into the workaholic trap. And, I think finding, like you said, taking that day a week or 2 days a week or whatever it is to detach yourself and do something. I don't care what that thing is, but to do something that you find enjoyment out of, and that, it doesn't have to have a big outcome at the end, can be very small, is actually quite powerful. And to just try to take enjoyment in those small things. Family for me is if I'm not working, I'm with my family. So that's my thing.
I know we both have a time constraint here. Let's wrap this up, man.
Sure, man.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I've
I
enjoyed it.
think this is going to be one of the more meaningful shows that people can listen to. There's some lessons in here that we haven't covered on any other show. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those with us.
Sure.
It's been awesome. I'll make sure that people have your LinkedIn profile in our show notes so somebody can reach out to you if they want to, or if they've got a business they want to present to you. We can put your email address in the show notes if that's what you want.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you all the info, and if people want to chat, and I always try to make myself available for people if they would like to have a quick conversation. So yeah, if I can ever be helpful to anyone, I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll call that a show and hang up for just a second. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.